Hi everyone, welcome back for Act 2 of Coppelia. So where we left before was all Swanhilda and all her friends have broken into Dr. Coppelius' house with his key, so not technically broken in. Franz is on his ladder, climbing up the balcony so he can see this girl, Coppelia, that, well, Swanhilda's done. That relationship's over. So now he wants to make sure that Coppelia still kind of like waving at him and making sure like maybe they can have a thing. So they're inside of Dr. Coppelius' house. So this is Act 2. Okay. The scene is a large room with dark walls. There is a large window at the back, and on the left is a curtained enclosure. Curious, immobile figures staring straight ahead sit and stand about the stage in fixed positions, each as if cut off in the middle of a gesture. But there is not time to observe them before Swanhilda and her friends walk in on tiptoe. The girls take in this weird room and are clearly sorry that they have let Swanhilda talk them into coming into this house. A small light throws their shadows against the walls, and they retreat to the center of the room. More curious than afraid, but still treading very softly in the room, Swanhilda roams about at the wooden light characters. They seem to be dolls, but they are all life-size, and the suspended gestures in which they are fixed are alarmingly human. On the right, seated on a cushion, sits a tall Chinaman dressed in a richly embroidered native costume. A one-man band in resplendent parade dress stands with an arm out, ready to strike a huge drum that he carries. An astronomer in long black robes and a high-peaked hat, a poised juggler in the middle of one of his tricks, a harlequin in typical diamond patch costume, and a king holding scepter in his hand, all are these characters that occupy Coppelius' room as if it were their home. So in some of the ballets, they do different dolls for different countries. So, you know it, I have props. I was the Scottish doll. Lots of jumps, you know. You know how much Rebecca loves those brises? Yeah, my kind of part. So, they are all individuals, each seem to exist apart from the others, yet to Swanhilda and her friends, the silent, still figures have no animate existence at all and resemble nothing except being huge dolls. So they're not moving, they're all posed in weird positions, kind of in the middle of a movement. So their arm might be halfway into port-de-bras, or they might be standing there in a plie. It looks like they're suspended animation, like they stopped a movement halfway through. Still, the girls are terrified by the darkness and the strange silence. Swanhilda is instinctively moved to investigate the curtained alcove where she thinks that Coppelia is. She goes over, starts to peep through the curtain, and then runs back to her friends. Her knees are trembling so much that one of the girls holds her shaking legs. This part of the ballet is kind of funny. The girls force Swanhilda to return to the curtain, and this time she's a little bolder. She looks behind the curtain, runs back to her friends, and gestures with movements to music that might accompany the dance of a mechanical doll. Coppelia is a doll, not a person. One of the girls accidentally collides with this sitting China doll, and they're all surprised as this doll throws up his arms, wags his head, and then does a dance. The terrified girls approach him carefully, but the doll does not change his position. He is a doll too, but a mechanical doll so close to reality that the girls have never imagined a doll like this before. They stare enthralled at his jerky automatic gestures, laugh, and search for the hidden pieces that make him work. They find nothing, the music dies down, and the doll stops as fast as he started. Swanhilda and her friends examine the doll Coppelia. Swanhilda reaches out and touches her. Coppelia is as cold as ice, utterly lifeless, a wax doll just like all the rest of them. Swanhilda takes her book away, and the frozen girl sits as before, her hands grasping at nothing. Swanhilda makes neither head nor tail of the book and turns back to the girl, absolutely certain that this lovely girl will not look up and wave to her as she did to Franz. She leans over to feel her heart. She feels nothing, because she thought she saw this doll wave to her boyfriend, but now this doll isn't doing anything, so she's really confused. She's sure that this charming creature of whom she was so jealous is merely an absurd doll. Swanhilda gathers her friends together and laughs at the prospect of Franz thinking that he's in love with just a doll. All the girls are tremendously relieved that they have no one to fear in the empty house and decide to run around to each of the dolls. They wind up the dolls, and soon all the mechanical dolls are dancing at the same time, but they're all dancing to their own dance. So even though the music is one piece of music for the entire scene, all of the dolls are doing their own specific dance to their nationality or whatever the dance is supposed to be. So the Spanish doll is doing a Spanish dance, or the Harlequin doll is doing a Harlequin dance. The Scottish doll is doing lots of changements and jumps. All of the girls are tremendously relieved that they have no one to fear in the empty house, so they're running around and they're turning all these dolls on. The one-man band starts to play, the juggler starts juggling, like I said, depending on what kinds of dolls the ballet decides to do. All of these dolls are dancing at the same time, but they're all doing different dances. They are so enchanted by the dolls that they do not hear Coppelius enter. The music imitates his fierce anger. He runs in, cape flying behind them, speechless with rage. He shakes his stick at the intruders and rushes about to catch them. All the girls retreat toward the door, all of them except Swanhilda, who sneaks into Coppelia's little cove while the toymaker shakes his stick at her fleeing friends and pulls the curtain closed. Coppelius comes back into the room, heads straight for the curtains to see if the girls have harmed his most cherished creation, his Coppelia doll. A window opens at the back and Coppelia stops. It is another intruder. He stands close against the back wall, ready to pounce on the stranger. Franz climbs into the room. Coppelius waits patiently until the man cannot return to the window and then sets upon him. Franz pleads that he means no harm, that he has entered merely to see the girl Coppelia that he seems to love, and that he will die unless he talks to her. Yeah, a little overdramatic much? Gradually, Coppelius realizes that Franz is quite serious, and he ceases to threaten him. He wants to hear more and astonishes Franz by becoming quite friendly. Coppelius insists that he stay, telling him that his daughter will be in very shortly, and invites the young man to sit down and have a drink, his daughter. So now Dr. Coppelius is kind of playing a trick on Franz because this guy broke into his house thinking that his doll was his daughter. So now he's going to play a trick on Franz on his own. When the drink is poured, Franz has no more apprehension and accepts it. The toymaker chatters with him, pretends to drink too, and Franz, gloriously happy now that he has neared his goal, fails to see that Coppelius is providing him with one drink after another. He tries to describe the beauties of Coppelia to the old man with drunken gestures, and his host nods repeatedly in agreement as Franz continues to drink this drink that Dr. Coppelius is giving him. Franz's head falls back against the chair, his arms hang limp in sleep, and in this room filled with dolls, he is almost like a doll himself. Coppelius checks to make sure that he is still sleeping, wrings his hands in glee that he's kind of caught Franz and kind of punished him a little bit. He takes out a huge leather book, puts it down on the floor, and leaves through the pages looking for a secret formula that he's never used before. Because remember, he dabbles a little bit in alchemy, which is chemistry. He finds it, leaps up, looks back at Franz, and approaches the curtains drawn across Coppelia's little closet. He yanks back the curtains, peers in, and examines carefully every feature of Coppelia's face and dress. The clever Swanhilda no longer resembles herself as she sits rigidly in Coppelia's costume, holding up her little book. So while Dr. Coppelius was playing his little trick on Franz and getting him to go to sleep, Swanhilda actually took the clothes off of the Coppelia doll and put them on herself. So now Swanhilda is the doll. Coppelius goes behind her chair and wheels Swanhilda onto the middle of the stage as the orchestra sounds a beautiful melody on the string instruments. He glances down at the book and makes magical gestures to Swanhilda's face. So now Dr. Coppelius has opened this book and he thinks that he's going to cast a spell over this doll to bring her to life, but he doesn't understand that it's already living because it's Swanhilda in the costume. Swanhilda doesn't blink. Now the toymaker runs over to Franz and is moving his hands over the man's body from head to foot, seeming to pretend to make him move too. Coppelius holds the life force tight in his hands and goes back to the doll, and he tries to put it to the doll. So basically, he thinks that he can cast a spell, take Franz's like essence, like his soul or whatever you want to call it, pull it out of Franz, put it in his doll, and bring Coppelia to life. He consults the book again and repeats the ritual. To his astonishment and happiness, Swanhilda tosses away the book, and Coppelius believes his wooden doll has actually come to life. So there's a funny part in this where Dr. Coppelius is running around Swanhilda, pretending to be Coppelia the doll, and so he thinks that he's cast this spell to bring the doll to life, but it's really Swanhilda. And she kicks him in the butt and like sends him across the stage, and he's like stumbling around, and he comes back and spins, and she spins around and like kicks him again. So it's pretty funny. Swanhilda's arms move stiffly as the music mimics the mechanics of her strength. She raises her head and stands up. Her body is still bent over in a sitting position. The delighted Coppelia straightens her up, and she stands still for a moment, her face expressionless. Then she begins to try out her arms and legs, pushing her feet out before her in a simulated walk. So this part is pretty much like up to the choreographer of whatever person is choreographing. So sometimes they like do the mechanical arms, almost like the robot, or like I said, they spin around and they kick Coppelius. They can do this whole like comedic act. So it's pretty great. Coppelius' master encourages Swanhilda's every step with more incantations. So he thinks that he's controlling her. So he's getting more and more like satisfied now because he thinks that he actually achieved this magic spell, and he's like making her do all of these motions. As Coppelius commands, her legs move less mechanically, and soon she is dancing in a light, sparkling waltz, perfecting her steps as she circles about. Now that he has taught her to dance, because he thinks that he's controlling her, the toy maker wishes her to continue showing off his magical powers. The doll smiles, but instead of dancing, she walks about the room as if she were exploring it for the first time. She goes over to Franz, shakes him, sees the discarded wine mug, and raises it to her lips. Coppelius snatches it from her just in the nick of time. He is beginning to find out that his live doll can be just as exasperating as any young girl. Swanhilda keeps up her fun with him, but still maintains her mechanical characteristics. So if you're playing the part of Swanhilda at this point, you are a human pretending to be a doll, pretending to come to life. So there's all these layers to you being able to do these variations right now. Like a child, she pretends in each one of her tricks merely to do what her teacher has been telling her to do in the first place. The tormented Coppelius beseeches her to dance again. She stares at him blankly. Finally, to keep her out of any more mischief, he distracts her by placing a black scarf on her shoulders, and she instantly responds by dancing the bolero. Now she's doing a Spanish dance as a doll that's coming to life to look like a person. The music is subdued, but the girl intensifies the impassioned Spanish dance as the tempo mounts. Dr. Coppelius now supposes that there is nothing he cannot make her do. He experiments her further by investing the doll with a Scottish plaid. So now he's gone over to the Scottish doll. Oh yeah. So he's taken this off the Scottish doll, which was me, and he puts it on Swanhilda, pretending to be a doll. And now she, sure enough, as the orchestra pipes a sprightly jig, she follows its rhythms like a good Scottish person. So now he thinks that because he took the Scottish scarf off of the doll and put it on her, now she can do a Scottish dance. So he really thinks he can control her at this point. At the end of this dance, however, Swanhilda has had enough. She kicks the pages of his magic book and runs around the room. She tries to wake Franz up from his stupor, but Dr. Coppelius becomes very anxious that she's going to harm herself as well as the other dolls, so he finally succeeds in grabbing her. He sets her down hard on her chair, shakes his finger in her face, and rolls the chair back into her little alcove, like on the balcony. Franz stirs, stretches, and looks about. Coppelius allows him no time for questions and tells him to get out of his house. Franz leaves eagerly, climbing back out the window. Swanhilda, no longer a doll, pushes the curtain aside and dashes around the room, knocking over every one of Coppelius's precious dolls, except the king, who stands over the chaotic scene. Then, all too lifelike, Swanhilda escapes through the door to catch up with Franz. So, Dr. Coppelius, so she puts her on the balcony where the doll used to be. Franz leaves the scene through the balcony, right past Swanhilda. Doesn't even see her. And then Swanhilda comes back out so she can escape, and as she's escaping, she ends up running into all the dolls again and pushing them over. So now all the dolls are doing their dances again. The shocked Coppelius cannot believe his eyes. He pulls back the curtains, and there, thrown across her chair, he sees the naked, limp body of his beloved Coppelia. Because Swanhilda has left Dr. Coppelia's house wearing the doll's costume. So now it's just a mannequin laying there on the floor. And scene. End of Act 2. We'll be back for the last act of the ballet Coppelia.